Hello, you are a theater and performance studies major, or at least most of you are. And for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that you're interested in both theater and performance studies. Now, you probably have some sense of what theater is because it's a very common topic, but performance studies is a little more specific. And the topic of this class is thinking all about what performance studies is, how it works, what are some of the major areas of study in it. Now, performance studies is at least two things. Performance studies is, first of all, an academic discipline. When I say that it's an academic discipline, I mean that it has topics of study, it has methods of study, and also has a body of literature. There are at least two general kinds of topics that people look at in performance studies. The first is cultural performances. Cultural performances are all kinds of things that happen in everyday life that we don't usually think of as performances, but can be seen as performances. So the production and performance of identity like gender and race are often understood as performances. Rituals like weddings and funerals are often understood as performances. And the ways that we present ourselves in everyday life are often understood as performances. All of those kinds of things can be understood as performances. And that's one area of things that people look at in performance studies. A second area of things they look at in performance studies are what we call conspicuous performances. Now, those other things are things people just do in their regular life, and they don't think of them as being performances. Conspicuous performances are things that people actually think of as being performances. So theater, the performance of literature, street musicians, improv, stand-up, storytelling, performance art, even things like slam poetry and underground rappers, all of those kinds of things are things that are meant to be understood as performances. Now, performance studies usually looks at those conspicuous performances and at cultural performances in relationship to how they are relating to and expressing culture. So, for instance, performance studies scholars wouldn't look at a New Orleans street musician and think about how well they play their songs or how exactly they play their songs, probably, because that's probably a question that a music scholar would look at. But they might think about how the songs they choose to perform communicate the history and culture of New Orleans, for instance, and also how the history and culture of New Orleans influences the songs that they play. So, culture matters in relationship to both conspicuous performances and also cultural performances, which goes without saying. Another way of thinking of this is that we can understand performance studies as a lens that you look through to look at different phenomena and to understand how they work. It's a critical lens, and by critical lens, I mean that it's trying to usually uncover the secrets behind a performance. What psychology and philosophy can tell us about that performance, where power resides in that performance, and how gender and race might play into that performance. All of these kinds of things are the secret undercurrents of performance, and that's what performance studies is often trying to uncover. So it's really cool because it starts to unpack all of those kinds of things. Now, there's of course a lot more to it, and there's a whole history to it that we're going to look at as well. But for now, we're going to push pause and stop here in terms of thinking about those two parts of the definition of performance studies. Thanks.